My parents gave my room to my stepsister, but she smashed a wall and ended up paralyzed. Now I'm living my best life knowing they can't do anything. I want this room. Can I have it? Victoria, my new stepsister, asked while pointing at my bedroom. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. I had that room since I was 6 years old. My mom and I put butterfly decals on the walls together before she passed away. When Victoria was told the guest room was right next door, she turned to Dad. Butterflies and pink are my favorites, she said. She walked into my bedroom and ran her hand over my mom's antique vanity desk. This would be perfect for my makeup collection. Please. The guest room barely has closet space. She smiled in a way that didn't feel sincere and added, "You can think of it as a gift. New family, new beginnings." I looked at Dad, expecting him to say something, anything. Instead, he came closer and asked, "Would you consider giving up your room for your new sister? She really wants it. If you agree, I'll give you the garage. You can decorate it however you like and move your mom's things there." The garage was almost 3 times the size of my bedroom, and it was separated from the rest of the house on the first floor. It sounded ideal. I smiled and hugged him. Deal. Victoria giggled when she found out I was moving to the garage and told me to clear out her pink room. It took 4 months to transform the dusty space into something I truly loved. I built bookshelves, created a reading corner with floor cushions, hung fairy lights across the rafters, and set up a workstation facing a new window that looked out onto the garden. I even added a small projector for movie nights and placed photos of my mom and me on the shelves. Soon, my friends started coming over more often. Even classmates talked about it. Victoria's mood changed the moment she saw the finished space. She complained to our parents. "She basically has a studio, and I just have a bedroom. That's not fair. I'm the new sibling. Shouldn't I get the nicer space?" My stepmom sighed and looked at Dad. "Maybe we should switch the rooms one last time." This time, Dad didn't give in. "She paid for the renovation herself. The garage is hers. You got the pink bedroom you asked for." End of discussion. Victoria was furious, but eventually said, "Fine, keep your stupid garage. I don't need it." For 2 weeks, she focused on upgrading the pink room. She bought expensive LED light strips that synced with music, installed a built-in vanity, and even set up a small bar outside her room to compete with my space. Dad used his credit card to cover the costs in an attempt to keep the peace, but nothing satisfied her. She would take guests upstairs to show off her updates. But the moment someone asked to see the famous garage room, she would leave the conversation. It became clear she wanted more space. One day, she claimed to be sick and stayed home while the rest of us went to my cousin's graduation. She watched us leave from her bedroom window. As soon as we were gone, she took a sledgehammer into her room and started breaking the wall between the pink bedroom and the guest room to create one large space. For a few seconds, it worked. The wall came down. Then the ceiling beam shifted. Neighbors later described a cracking sound like thunder. Drywall, insulation, and a heavy ceiling joist collapsed. Victoria looked up but couldn't move in time. The beam struck near the base of her skull and trapped her. She was conscious and screaming for help, but we were hours away. She remained pinned for nearly 4 hours before neighbors called 911. According to the paramedics, she kept saying, "I can't feel anything." We arrived at the hospital 7 hours later and waited through surgery. A doctor finally told us the outcome. Victoria would never move her neck again. She would need a ventilator to breathe and full-time care. At 19, she would never walk or live independently. When she was able to speak using the ventilator, she asked to see me. I thought she might want comfort. Instead, she said, "You made me feel like I had to compete for space in my own house. Now I'll never paint my nails or try on clothes again. I just wanted to belong." My stepmom blamed me and Dad. "Why couldn't you share your room? Why didn't you help her decorate when you saw how badly she wanted something special?" The upstairs was eventually closed off. Victoria moved into the garage because it was the only area large enough for her medical equipment. I assumed that was the end of it, until an insurance investigator called. The ventilator's steady sound filled the room when my phone rang. The man introduced himself as Ethan Parker from the insurance company. He said they were reopening the case and needed me at the police station that afternoon. My hands shook as I wrote down the address, even though I already knew it. When I told Dad and Rebecca about the call, Rebecca immediately accused me of saying something to cause suspicion. Dad simply said, "We should cooperate." At the station, Detective Olivia Cruz met me and led me into a small interview room. She explained that the insurance company's routine device forensics had flagged Victoria's search history from the week before the accident. She turned her tablet toward me. Victoria had searched. How long does an insurance claim take? What happens if you destroy a house without a permit? Does homeowners insurance cover accidental demolition? Structural damage insurance payout average? Can you get in trouble for knocking down a load-bearing wall? 6 days before the collapse. On the morning of the accident, she searched how to fake being sick convincingly. Best excuses to skip family event. I felt cold reading it. The detective asked about the garage renovation. I explained I used 8 months of savings from my part-time library job and bought materials from Home Depot. Dad helped install the window and ran wiring from the main panel. When she asked about building permits, I admitted I wasn't sure if we had any. She explained that the investigation now involved potential insurance fraud, code violations, and reckless endangerment. Even if Victoria only endangered herself, the legal consequences could affect the entire family. I handed over my phone and laptop immediately to prove I wasn't involved. The next morning, Dad received confirmation from the investigator. Victoria had planned the demolition in advance. A neighbor reported hearing loud music and repeated hammering for over 2 hours before the collapse. A delivery truck had dropped off a package days earlier, later identified as the sledgehammer. Bank records showed Rebecca's credit card had been used to purchase the vanity, LED lights, and the sledgehammer from the same hardware store over a 3-week period. Rebecca insisted she only knew about the decorations and never approved buying demolition tools. The evidence suggested this wasn't an emotional outburst. It was planned. Victoria researched insurance coverage, timing, and consequences. She expected the policy to fix any damage. She didn't plan to be paralyzed. Now, the investigation continues. Insurance fraud, unpermitted renovations, and reckless demolition are all under review. Criminal charges are unlikely given her condition, but fines and legal action against the family remain possible. I often think about the 4 hours she spent trapped under that beam. I also think about the months she spent feeling like she had to compete. But the records show something clear. She made a decision, researched it carefully, and followed through. And now, we're all living with the consequences. She also insisted that Victoria must have taken her credit card from her purse and used it without permission since they lived in the same house. But Dad looked at Rebecca differently after hearing that. His eyes narrowed and his jaw tightened. It was obvious he was calculating how much she actually knew and how much she was pretending not to know. Detective Cruz explained that the credit card records supported the conclusion that Victoria prepared everything over several weeks, not just a few days. She then showed us text messages from 8 days before the accident, recovered from Victoria's phone backup. Rebecca had written, "You need to make it impossible for them to ignore how unfair this is." Victoria replied, "I have a plan." Rebecca sent more messages about how I always got what I wanted while Victoria received leftovers. Victoria responded with screenshots of room designs, writing captions like, "This is what I deserve. Why does she get the cool space?" Rebecca began crying as she read her own words on the detective's tablet. She said she only meant that Victoria should decorate her room and improve it, not tear down walls. Detective Cruz calmly explained that the messages encouraged escalation, even if Rebecca did not know the full plan. Victoria likely felt justified taking extreme action because her mother repeatedly reinforced the idea that she deserved more. As I listened, I started remembering past events differently. Rebecca often pressured Dad to pay for Victoria's upgrades, saying, "She needs to feel equal in this family. You can't let one daughter have everything while the other has nothing." At the time, I thought she was protecting her child. Now, it seemed like she had fueled Victoria's frustration, validating every complaint and framing me as the problem. Rebecca never once suggested gratitude or discouraged constant comparison. Instead, she kept highlighting what I had that Victoria didn't, turning everything into a competition, A sharp wave of anger hit me as I realized her words had helped shape this disaster. On the fourth day of the investigation, a structural engineer named Sarah Matthews arrived at our house. She introduced herself as hired by the insurance company to assess the damage. Dad let her inside, and she went straight upstairs to the sealed-off area. She spent 3 hours measuring, photographing, and recording observations. When she came downstairs, her expression was serious. She laid photos of the collapsed ceiling and demolished wall on the coffee table and explained clearly. The wall Victoria removed was load-bearing. It supported the second-floor ceiling joists. Removing it caused the structural failure. Sarah showed us the city's original building plans from 1987. The wall between the pink bedroom and guest room was marked as structural, not decorative. She asked Dad whether he had obtained permits for any upstairs alterations. Dad admitted he assumed cosmetic interior changes didn't require permits. Sarah explained that demolishing any wall, especially a load-bearing one, required approval. Without proper reinforcement, the ceiling beam had to carry excessive weight and eventually failed. She then inspected the first floor and entered my garage space. She paused at the window Dad and I installed and asked whether we had obtained a permit for it. Dad admitted he had not. She explained that adding any opening to an exterior wall required a permit because it affected the structural envelope and moisture protection. The city would likely require retroactive permits and inspections for both violations. Dad nodded quietly, looking defeated. I felt sick thinking about the financial impact. A few days later, hospital social worker Lucas Harper visited to review Victoria's home care setup. He examined the ventilator, feeding supplies, and adjustable bed that now filled most of the garage. He asked detailed questions about our daily routine and overnight responsibilities. After reviewing everything, he gently explained that the arrangement was not sustainable long-term without professional nursing support. Rebecca reacted defensively, saying we were doing our best without resources. Lucas responded calmly, acknowledging the difficulty while emphasizing the need for proper care. After he left, Rebecca remained in the kitchen instead of checking on Victoria. I overheard her crying. She said she had lost her upstairs bedroom and now lived in a house that felt like a hospital. Then she looked at me and said the garage was supposed to be my lesson for being selfish, a reminder that I couldn't always get what I wanted. Instead, it became Victoria's permanent space, the only room large enough for her medical equipment. I didn't respond. I walked back to my temporary sleeping area in the den, unsure whether to feel sympathy or frustration. Later that night, Lucas called to check on me. I admitted that everyone seemed to blame me for not sharing my room originally. He listened carefully and then said something important. Victoria made her own decisions. I was allowed to feel hurt for being treated as the scapegoat. Hearing that from someone outside the family shifted something in me. The next morning, Detective Cruz called again. She informed us that Victoria had drafted an Instagram post the morning of the accident. Room transformation reveal coming today, along with renovation hashtags. She also found a video script where Victoria wrote, "Why not go big when Dad's insurance can fix anything?" The detective explained this showed unrealistic thinking about insurance coverage. Victoria believed damage could be repaired without serious consequences. Rebecca insisted she didn't know about demolition plans. However, additional text messages revealed that when Victoria expressed doubt, Rebecca reassured her that Dad's insurance was strong and she shouldn't worry. The implication was clear. Even without direct knowledge of demolition, Rebecca created an environment where Victoria believed she was protected from consequences. After Detective Cruz left, Dad sat alone in his car for a long time. At school, the situation followed me. My friend group shrank. Students whispered about the garage drama. Someone spray-painted garage influencer on my locker. I began eating lunch in my car to avoid attention. I even considered transferring schools for my final year. A week later, neighbors gave another statement. They had seen Rebecca upstairs days before the accident, measuring and discussing layout changes with Victoria. Rebecca admitted she helped plan a combined room layout, but denied knowing about demolition. 2 days later, insurance investigator Ethan Parker called. He explained that the structural damage claim would likely be denied because the demolition was intentional and done without permits. Shortly after, we received official confirmation. Medical coverage for Victoria would continue under health insurance, but home repair costs, estimated between $80,000 and $120,000, would be our responsibility, along with city fines. Dad looked physically smaller after hearing the numbers. The city building department later issued formal violation notices for the unpermitted demolition and garage window installation. Repairs would require licensed contractors and inspections. Lucas returned with a structured care plan, 12 hours of Medicaid-covered nursing daily, with family members covering overnight shifts. Training sessions began the following week. Dad and I attended the first class. Rebecca said she was unwell and did not come. We practiced ventilator management and emergency procedures on mannequins. It was exhausting, but Dad took careful notes and asked repeated questions to ensure he understood. After one session, Detective Cruz approached me privately and advised me to document any concerning behavior at home. That night, I started keeping a journal. 3 nights later, Victoria's ventilator alarm sounded. I went into the garage. It was only a positioning alert. She told me she never expected the ceiling to collapse. She said she just wanted a bigger room and assumed insurance would handle any small damage. Then she added that she wouldn't have felt desperate if the public perception was difficult, but she continued, "We should assume the insurance denial will stand. If the city fines move forward, Child Protective Services may step in to offer family support." Grace advised Dad that we could file an appeal, but the insurance policy clearly excluded intentional damage. She outlined our options regarding the city code violations and explained how to cooperate with CPS if they became involved. At that moment, I chose to speak up and interrupted her. I explained Rebecca's ongoing pressure, how she pushed Dad to give Victoria the garage and supported every increasing demand Victoria made. Dad appeared uneasy, but I continued. I described how Rebecca made him feel guilty for setting limits and how she backed Victoria's expensive room upgrades while criticizing me for having too much space. Grace noted that this background was important for understanding the family dynamic, even if it did not change the legal outcome. She recommended family mediation once the immediate crisis settled, suggesting a neutral professional could help address the resentment and blame. Dad agreed to consider it, and we scheduled a follow-up meeting for 2 weeks later. 3 days after that, Detective Cruz called while I was preparing lunch. She asked that we come in Friday at 2 p.m. for a final meeting regarding the investigation. Representatives from the insurance company, city building department, and social services would present their conclusions and recommendations. I confirmed we would attend. It felt like the closing chapter of a long process, though I didn't know what that would mean for us. Dad took the day off work. We drove to the police station quietly, Rebecca looking out the window the entire time. The meeting was held in a larger conference room. Detective Cruz sat at the head of the table with her tablet and documents arranged in front of her. She thanked everyone and reviewed the timeline to ensure clarity. She explained that Victoria researched load-bearing walls and sledgehammer demolition 6 days before the collapse, insurance coverage for accidental damage 2 days later, and how to fake illness on the morning of the incident. Her tone was factual and steady. She presented the neighbor's testimony about the sledgehammer delivery and described how Victoria worked on demolishing the wall for nearly 2 hours before it failed. She displayed the text messages between Rebecca and Victoria, including Rebecca's statements about making the unfairness impossible to ignore and reassuring Victoria about insurance coverage. Rebecca sat beside Dad with her hands folded, avoiding the screen. Dad tried to take notes, but his hand trembled. Ethan from the insurance company confirmed that the structural damage claim was denied due to intentional demolition and unpermitted work. The policy excluded coverage for deliberate acts by household members, regardless of whether consequences were fully understood. His tone was professional and direct. Jason from the city listed the violations: unpermitted demolition upstairs and the unapproved garage window installation. He explained we would need a licensed contractor, proper permits, inspections, and approximately 90 days to bring the property up to code. He issued a $4,000 fine and provided documentation outlining next steps. Dad wrote down dates and figures carefully. Detective Cruz stated that the police were not recommending criminal charges. Victoria's actions showed poor judgment and recklessness, but she was already facing severe, life-altering consequences. There was insufficient evidence that Rebecca knew about the demolition itself, only that she encouraged escalating behavior. The health insurance coverage for Victoria would continue. The city would reduce additional penalties if remediation began within 30 days. Part of me wanted accountability, but I also feared further damage to our already strained situation. Lucas then addressed the room. He explained that our family would be referred to Child Protective Services for voluntary support services, not as punishment, but to ensure access to counseling, therapy, and caregiver resources. CPS could connect us with therapists and support networks to help manage the stress of long-term medical care. Rebecca began crying quietly. Detective Cruz passed her tissues and acknowledged how difficult this was for everyone. After the meeting, Dad gathered the reports and paperwork into a stack. As we walked to the car, Rebecca suddenly grabbed my arm and accused me of being selfish and showing off the garage, saying I made Victoria feel so insignificant that she acted out. People nearby looked over. She insisted I could have shared the room or helped Victoria decorate instead of letting it become a competition. Her anger shifted into grief. She said she was terrified of losing Victoria, overwhelmed by guilt, and didn't know how to fix anything. She apologized through tears, though it wasn't clear to whom. I stood there unsure how to respond. Dad gently guided her into the car. That evening, after dinner, Dad called a family meeting. He announced he would take a leave of absence from work to focus on the remediation project and complete caregiver training for Victoria. He had already contacted a contractor and reviewed repair timelines. He explained the steps methodically, as if presenting a project plan. I told them I would help with Victoria's care and house repairs, but I would not be the sole caregiver or the family's scapegoat. I said I had school, college applications, and my own future to consider. My tone was steady. Dad nodded. Rebecca did not argue. It was not dramatic, but it marked a boundary. Soon after, Lucas returned with the finalized nursing schedule. A professional aide would cover 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, and family members would rotate overnight shifts. He introduced an eye gaze tablet and an improved speaking valve for Victoria, making communication easier. As the equipment was organized and upgraded, the garage felt more functional and less clinical. Jason later returned with the approved remediation plan. A licensed contractor would install proper structural beams upstairs and repair the ceiling. The garage window would be brought up to code. The project would take 8 to 10 weeks and cost $85,000, financed through a home equity loan. When the insurance company's final letter arrived, Dad opened it at the kitchen table. The structural claim was officially denied, as expected. However, the company approved an $18,000 stipend for adaptive technology and accessibility improvements. Lucas explained it could fund a ceiling lift system and upgraded ventilator equipment. For the first time in weeks, Dad smiled. That weekend, I reclaimed a small section of the garage by organizing Victoria's equipment and clearing a corner near the window. I placed a shelf Dad had built years ago and arranged Mom's framed photos and my favorite books. It was only a few feet of space, but it felt personal again. Victoria watched through her eye gaze device. I explained I wasn't taking over, just claiming a small area. She signaled agreement. The next day, I brought her nail polish collection and set up a light-hearted movie. I painted her nails carefully while the film played in the background. We sat quietly, without argument. She admitted she wanted the admiration my garage received because she felt invisible. She believed a dramatic transformation would make her special. She did not apologize. I told her I understood wanting recognition, but the demolition was her decision. I would support her as family, but I would not accept responsibility for her choices. We had to move forward honestly. Dad changed after receiving the insurance letter. He hung a large calendar in the kitchen and color-coded our schedules, nursing shifts, therapy appointments, inspections, and my school commitments. Rebecca suggested adjustments to avoid conflicts. It was not affectionate, but it was cooperative. 2 months after the meeting, the contractor completed the first major structural milestone. The new beams were installed and passed inspection. Jason reduced the remaining fine to $2,000 due to our compliance. Dad framed the inspection approval certificate and hung it in the hallway. It symbolized progress. At school, I researched colleges with strong disability support programs and focused on options close to home. Dad helped review my applications and told me he was proud I hadn't abandoned my goals. 3 months after the collapse, life settled into a structured routine. Nursing care covered most of the day. Repairs were more than halfway finished. Financial pressure remained heavy due to the loan payments.